Hey guys, this is Steven from Patchwerks. This following video was edited down from a past stream I did where I gave a little performance with my live performance setup with the Syntakt and my modular case. Throughout the video, I kind of do a little patch breakdown and talk a little bit about live performance, at least my philosophy with live performance. So enjoy it. Sweet. Well, there it is. Little jam we had going on there. Not everything went as planned, as usual, when it comes to playing with gear like this, but things always just kind of work out sometimes, which is cool. So yeah, the Mother-32 is my ever hardware synth, and that's how I learned modular synthesis on. So I still think it's a fantastic learning tool because of that reason, you know, for people who want to jump into this world, but don't want to make the full dive into a big system. But anyway, yeah, so the Mother-32 was doing some bass lines and also the acid bass lines, especially with that the resonance cranked. And what's really pushing it is the stereo strip here that's being processed with. It just makes it scream. And I could also do the same thing with veils when you overdrive the channels with veils, because it has a great overdrive and it's fantastic for that kind of super distorted acid sound. But stereo strip has that EQ on there, so I can use it performatively. You know, if I wanted to just low pass the bass, but I still want to keep the sound of it still in the mix, you know, I'll just take that low end out with the slider right there. And also I had some weird, it's not weird, but I had some audio rate modulation going into the panning. And so that is coming from mats here. So this channel, the right side channel of mats, is going at audio rate into the pan CV. And I'm just using channel 4 out, so I have this attenuator here to play with. And there is also an attenuator or attenuator here on the stereo strip to do that, but I just prefer to have it on mats. But yeah. So like this is with the no CV, and then this is with the audio rate on the panning. So like that's really cool for adding textural sounds. You know, when you're dealing with working with something like the Modular-32, it sounds fantastic, but got a little bit of sound going on here. There we go. It works great for making super solid bass lines, but when it comes to creating sounds that are not just like your basic square wave going into the filter and just going straight out, you know, you just spice things up. You can combine it with other sources of modulation, other effects, makes it easier to make transitions from your different parts in your set. And that's actually something I'd like to talk about as well. It's just like how to go about writing a set, you know, to be able to move from one pattern to the next seamlessly. And honestly, like my philosophy on that is to always have a sound that is consistent throughout the entire set. Like it can change timbrally a little bit, but have something that's consistent across, so it ties everything together. So for example, on the Syntakt, I had these chords playing, and those chords are there on every single pattern. You know, like we had it on this little like electro kind of beat, but also at the end here, we have it. There we go. We have it on this 4 on the floor kind of house techno-ish thing. And we can bring the Mother-32 back in. And just like that, it really kind of ties your entire set together. But yeah, so at the heart of sequencing in my modular though, got the Metropolix. And Metropolix, it's still a module I am currently learning. I've had it for a couple weeks now. I'm absolutely in love with it. It's like I've gone from the Renee, and I went from Renee to the Black Sequencer, and then now I'm at the Metropolix. And I've come to the conclusion that I think Metropolix and Renee are probably my top 2 favorite sequencers because they're so jammable, immediate. Looking at the panel of the Metropolix, you might not think it's immediate, but it really is because these sliders here So this is for your pitch data. Down here, these smaller sliders are for your gate, so you can just turn steps or your stages on and off. You have two pitch tracks out, pitch CV and gate out. However, they're not separate. Like the tracks, both tracks are sharing the same pitch sequence and the same gate sequence. But what really makes it special is that let's see if I can get these cables out the way. You have like different play order, linear, ping pong, pendulum, different directions, reverse and forward. You can even change like the length, like how many stages are active for this track and how many stages are active for the other track. So you can actually make it so they seem independent of each other, but really they're still tied to the same melodic line, which is fantastic when it comes to jamming, because you can just set up a scale that you want to play with here. So I'm on a Dorian scale, and I can just like flip some sliders, and no matter how I change up my pitch sequence, both the Plaits and Moog-Mother-32 are going to be compatible with each other. Like you're not going to have any weird notes collide or anything because both tracks are related. However, because the order and play length and active stages are different per track, it seems like they're on totally two different sequencers. So that's why I love the Metropolix. And I can also, quick access to the gates and stuff, so I can turn on notes and stuff. And if I'm like, for example, playing like a techno thing, I can start minimally and then slowly start introducing notes over time. So that's really cool. And then on the other end of things, Plaits here is making some, see if I can get it going. See, where did Plaits go? Oh, here it is. So I believe this is the wavetable algorithm on Plaits. And the reason why I chose this one is because if I'm playing for a longer time and I don't want to fuss around with like finding the correct algorithm or trying to remember which ones I'm using, I just use the wavetable one because I can get a pretty good different number of timbres here. Sorry, trying to reach over the mic. So like even just like subtle movements like this on like the harmonics knob like just gave me two totally separate timbres, and that's just kind of why I love Plaits. It's just so many possibilities with it. If there's a certain sound you're trying to look for to fit your needs, they probably have it in one of those algorithms. And in the case of this algorithm, I was using the timbre knob almost as if it was a high pass filter, even though it is essentially just shifting up the harmonics, if I believe that's correct. And let's see here. And of course that's going through Mimeophone. And I'm going to say a lot of things in this case are my favorite because it's my case. And so it is actually my favorite. Like Mimeophone's one of my favorite delays. Yeah. So it's very spacious right now because I have the halo turned up. But if I turn it down and then bring the color back up, so remove the filtering, it becomes harsher, but it's still not really harsh. It's still pretty smooth and can sit well in a mix. And that honestly is one of the most important things to me. Is like when I'm picking and choosing how I use my effects and stuff, I want to make sure things sit well in a mix. Because, you can have like the world's greatest sounding delay, but if it doesn't sit well with everything else, it's kind of useless. Like it's just not going to sound good in that sense. And so, yeah, that's why I like Mimeo for that reason. And just kind of soften out the delays here. And then you also may have saw me hitting the flip button while I was running through the performance. So the flip, it reverses the direction of the delays and like how they play back. So right now it's like, it's a kind of a plucky sound. And if I hit flip, it's going backwards. So that's also just like a nice little touch to add some more flavor to your performance. And it's like, that's kind of the thing with Modular. I feel like when you're performing, you're trying to keep things interesting. And you might think it's like, oh, I just need a whole new module to keep things interesting. But when really the fact is that like, it's really small, subtle things like this that just keeps people engaged. You don't need giant, grand movements. Although it is also needed, when you're making a drop and all that, when you bring the beat in, take it out. Those are like your big movements. But like small things like this is when you have like a beat that's moving and you just want to keep riding it and just keep that groove moving. So it's little things like that keeps driving your music. So the one thing after I finished performance, I did mention that some things didn't go the way I wanted it to, and I actually just totally forgot to use beads. Originally intended for beads to have this little glitchy thing on it, which is really cool, and it adds some texture to your music. And like texture, I feel is sometimes it's an overlooked aspect of writing your music, and because you have something that's repetitive going on, and it sounds great and all, but it's a pulse wave, and I feel like a lot of us who are in this world know what a pulse wave sounds like. We know what pulse width modulation sounds like. So when you start introducing weird textures like this that you can't normally get from a traditional synthesizer, it keeps people engaged, and people are gonna be like, oh, what's that new thing? What's that sound? And that's like the ultimate key, is like having people guessing, like, what's that sound? Like, I want to know what it is. Because that for me, that's like kind of how it's like, okay, your set, your music, it went well. People are receiving it well. Like, they want to know. Beats is a texture synthesizer. This isn't on the panel. It's for that texture. I can push it to the extreme. Give it some like reverb. Yeah, I can easily get lost in that. So yeah, that's really cool. And I'm also clocking in quotes beads here. Turn that off. And what I'm essentially doing, I'm just grabbing the clock out from Metropolis, and then just sending that into the density input right there. And so like if I bring it back up, that's in time. Like those grains and how it's being spit out is in time with it. Like sometimes it might not sound like it, because when I use it on the right side of the density knob, when it kind of gets a little random, but that little bit of randomness is still in time, and it's kind of weird to think about, but it just gives it a little bit of that like uncertainty. It keeps people guessing kind of thing. So yeah, so that's what Beats and Mother-32 is doing. Let's see. So I also have the Doepfer A102 low pass filter. This one arguably is my favorite Doepfer low pass. I have several Doepfer filters and they're all fantastic, but I think this one was just the one that like kind of gelled with me the most. But one really cool patching trick I like to do is like, for example, if let's say I didn't have the Mother-32, and I only had Plaits, but I also wanted an additional voice. I don't want to throw in another oscillator, so I can actually repurpose my filter. It can make filters self-resonate and all that. Oh, had it turned down. See if I can get this thing to peak a little bit. So there it is, and let me take that envelope out of there. And yeah, so you can have your filters self-resonate. And when you're sending another oscillator through it, I'm taking the same volt per octave output from Metropolis that's going into Plaits, multing it, sending it into Plaits, and also to modulate the low-pass filter. So it's not in tune with each other. However, you have now an additional new element with there that is playing along with Plaits. Like it's not just going off and doing its own thing. It's not like shooting off laser beams, although it can if I wanted to have it do that. So it's like, when you're thinking about smaller setups, little tricks like that really will let you get a lot more mileage out of your little modular. But yeah, let's see. It's really not much else I got going on here. I'm not doing like any insane modulation, and like I keep that more for like when I'm trying to do more sound design work. But if I'm building up a set, I try to avoid really crazy patches or anything that gets too convoluted or complex quickly, because like I said, like I was playing and I already forgot to use an entire whole module, and so let alone like I can't rely on myself to keep track of all like the small and weird modulation that I got going on if I were to make something crazier. Like that's a whole nother world. And of course, always just keep practicing and you'll just eventually start getting it. However, I need to do that. I need to take my own advice. Yeah, that's the setup here. Like I said, Metropolis, fantastic sequencer. I still love it. I haven't actually dove into the mod lanes yet. I know like once I do that, that's just a whole nother can of worms that's going to open, because I have two mod outs, A and B, and that's really cool. And even these controls here, I can assign these control knobs to nearly every parameter within the system. Like I can assign it to like the order, so I can immediately change deploy order here without having to dive into a menu. I just didn't have the time to set that up for today. So yeah, endless possibilities from Metropolis. I can't stop saying good things about it. It's just so jammable, you know. And we could actually quickly just get a little taste of playing around with the sequence and messing around with it. And so let's bring the Mother-32 back in. So now if I just start playing with the sliders, and then maybe I'll go into track 2, which is the Mother-32, and I'll change up the stages that's active. Let's make it 5 stages, and let's also offset it a little bit. It's kind of hard to see here, but yeah, just change it to 5 stages, and right next to it is the offset. And just like that, just like very small movements like that, just completely changed up my entire sequence. And I can just bring a kick in. Let's say I want to take out a few notes here. And let's change up some of the sequence again. So you can hear Plaits is playing a totally different sequence from Moog, or from the Mother-32, but they're still related, and that's the cool thing about Metropolis. Modular is cool. Like, you know, this very self-contained system, you know, ignoring the Syntakt. I can play with this setup for hours, and I will have to say a lot of it is because of the style of sequencer and what type of sequencer you're using. You know, you can pick something like the NerdSeq to be your sequencer, like a tracker style. That's something that's really cool. You can make some really, really complex sequences. However, it's something that's very intentional. And for me, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something that is quick and hands-on and allows me to make quick changes, improvise with it, and essentially just be able to play for as long as I want without worrying about like, oh no, what am I going to do for my next sequence? I can just be like, all right, let's do this. Let's try that out. And cool, now we got a new sequence. But yeah, Metropolis, can't stop thinking about it. I love you. Stereo strip, fantastic. You know, 3-band EQ. You can do line level input, Eurorack level input, line level output, Eurorack level output. You have a mute switch, temporary with toggle. And that was what was driving the Mother-32 and really pushing those acid lines. You can overdrive with the stereo strip. Super gnarly. And if I bring it back to Eurorack level on the input and maybe turn the level down a little bit, also actually turn the level down on the Mother-32 before it hits the stereo strip. So it just got really quiet, but this is generally what the Mother-32 actually sounds like. You know, it's a squelchy filter. But the moment you just start pushing the stereo strip, it's just super nasty. That's disgusting.